This video will be on how to create batch reports within CenterPoint. In another video on Report Favorites, we talk about organizing the reports on your Favorites tab by creating folders for the reports. Once you have created these folders for the reports, they can become a batch of reports. Batch of reports allow you to run multiple reports at the same time without having to select each report individually. So if you send that batch of reports to print, all of the reports will print in that batch. If you export them, they'll all be exported out into the same file. Very often, customers will use batch reports when they need to send a group of reports to, let's say, their accountant or their banker on different periodic frequencies. Now, just putting the reports into a folder isn't quite enough. There is a little bit about how you select the date range on the reports that is required in order to really make it a batch of reports. So to go ahead and show this, we're going to go ahead and create a batch of reports that we need to send to our accountant on a monthly basis. So at the end of every month, we go ahead and send a series of reports to the accountant. And those reports are going to be an income statement, a balance sheet, a general ledger report, and a bank register report. So we're going to go ahead and first create our batch by first going to reports and then to reports. And you can see here that it's landed on my favorites tab, and I already have some reports out there on my favorites tab into folders. And I also have my database favorites tab displayed. Database favorites are also something that is discussed in the report favorite video. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my main report screen, and we're going to go to the search bar up at the top here, and I'm going to type in income for income statement. Now there's many variations of the income statement, but the one that my accountant wants is the one up here at the top. The most important thing when going ahead and setting up a report for a report batch is how you select the date range for that report. So over here, I'm going to highlight the income statement, and on the right-hand side, I'm going to go ahead and choose the date range. Now, our accountant wants us to include an income statement that is this fiscal year to date. So if I happen to be in April, I could go ahead and set my date range for January through April manually like that, but then that changes this custom date range to be or this drop down here to be custom. Now, when the system is set to custom, it doesn't really work very well with batch reports, because how does it then calculate the date range when the new month is May? Okay, when you've got it fixed at January through April, how does the system calculate what that new date range should be? So we need to choose one of the drop-down options, the other drop-down options. And what we want is this fiscal year to date. So for right now, this fiscal year to date does happen to be January through April. But when it becomes May, fiscal year to date will be January through May. So the system can then calculate the new dates correctly. Now, selecting the company is not something that you need to worry about when setting up a batch, because when you go to run the batch, you can go ahead and select the company. But if you wanted to, just while you're setting it up, you can go ahead and select your company. If you happen to be using the fund accounting version of CenterPoint, the company will actually be equal to the fund. Okay, so you can select the funds that you're running it for. You'll go ahead and make whatever other selections you want. And then when you save that as a favorite, it does save those selections as well. So those will be defaulted the next time you go to run the report. I'm going to go ahead and preview this report. You would also want to go ahead and make any formatting changes. Okay, those are discussed in the video on changing the format to CenterPoint reports. Now you could, add columns, you could change the grouping and sorting or whatever other format changes you want to do. I'm not going to get into those formatting changes in this video. Once you're done with the formatting changes, you can go ahead and save it to your favorites by going ahead and clicking on the star at the top. And I'm just going to call this, just to make it, distinguish it from other income statements that might be on my favorites tab, I'm going to call this my income statement for accountant. And then I'm going to click OK. So now I've got my first report on the tab there. I'm going to go back to the reports tab over here, and we're going to clear that out of the search bar. And the next report we're going to add is the balance sheet. So I go ahead and add the balance sheet here. And the balance sheet that our accountant would like to see is this one here that says balance sheet 2 columns. Again, choosing the company or the fund is not really that important because we can choose that when we run it. But choosing the correct period is. Now, the last date range that I chose on the income statement was this fiscal year to date, which happened to be January through April for me. But in reality, I probably haven't run these reports yet for March. Okay, so when I run it, I'm going to be able to pick a date that I want to run the reports as of. And since the other report was this fiscal year to date, so it went to the current period, I want to make sure that I choose this balance sheet that is really only run for one period at a time. I want to choose it to be this month rather than last month, just to be consistent with my other report, which at this time would run it from January through April. So by choosing this month, it's going to choose April for me. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and preview that report too. And again, I would make any formatting changes I wanted to. And when I'm done making all my formatting changes, I'm going to go ahead and add it to my favorites and call it the balance sheet for accountant. Okay, and I'm going to click OK on that, and now that adds that second report there. I have 2 more reports I want to add quickly. The next one that I wanted to add is a general ledger report, so I'm going to go ahead and choose the general ledger. And this is the general ledger version that the accountant would like to see. And as I highlighted over here, the period that they want to see it for is actually this fiscal year to date. So he wants us to do a general ledger that kind of matches the balance sheet at this fiscal year to date. So we're going to make that selection. Again, if I wanted to, I could go ahead and select my company or funds, but when I run the batch, I'm going to be able to select which company or funds I want to run it for as well. I'm going to preview the report. Again, we would make any kind of formatting changes we needed to it and then add it to our favorites. And I'm going to call this the general ledger for accountant, just to be consistent with the other reports. Okay, so I've got 3 reports out there and I have 1 more to go. I'm going to go back to the reports tab. We're going to clear that search by clicking on the X at the end there, and we want to find the bank register report. So I typed in the word bank, and this is the bank register report our accountant would like. And over on the right hand side, he wants this bank register report for our main checking account, and he only wants it for the current month. Okay, so I'm going to choose the date range to be this month, just like I did for the balance sheet. So I want to be consistent when I go ahead and do this. So I'm going to choose it for this month. I want to choose our main checking account, which I did by going ahead and moving it over to the right. And then if I wanted to, I could choose my company right now. But again, I'm going to be able to choose that when we go ahead and run the report. I'm going to go ahead and preview that. And then I'm going to add it to my favorites. I'm going to call this the bank register for accountant. So now I have the 4 reports that I wanted to be included in this batch over here on my favorites tab. Now to make them a batch, we're going to put them in a folder together. So to create a new folder on the screen, we're going to click with our right mouse button in a blank area of the screen, and we're going to choose to create a new folder. It's going to ask us to give that folder a name. I'm going to call these my monthly reports or accountant. And then I'm going to drag each report into that folder. So just drag them one by one into that folder. Okay. So the order that you see them on the list there is going to be the order that they print or they export in. So if you want to change that order, what you need to just do is just hold your left mouse button on a report that you want to change the order of, and then take and, oops, sorry about that, I accidentally went and previewed it. Just take and just drag it up to where you want it to be. So I wanted the income statement to be first. I wanted the balance sheet to be second, and then the bank register and the general ledger report. Okay, so that's going to be the order that they print or preview in. Now, to go ahead and print or preview the report, I don't have to select each report individually. What I want to do is highlight the folder up at the top, and you're going to see over to the right that we have a few selections that we can make for this batch. So we're going to select a batch date. So right now it shows the reports as all being for April, but in reality, I haven't run my March reports yet. So if I come in here and I change this ending date to the end of March, it goes ahead and it recalculates the date range for all of those reports to only include the period up to March or the March period itself. Okay, so I'm going to click OK on those. This is where I get to choose which companies I want to run the report for. And again, if you're a fund accounting, this would be choosing which fund or funds you want to run that report for. And then the other selection at the very end is going to give you the option of being able to include a listing of all of the reports that are in this badge as a separate page at the end of the printing of these reports, kind of like an index of what's included in this. Okay, so I'm going to say yes, I want to include that as well. That's an option. You don't have to include it if you don't want to. So now to print, preview, or export them, you're going to choose it from the buttons down at the bottom while you are highlighted on the batch itself. So if I was to go ahead and click print, it would just print each report one after another. If I go ahead and click preview, it goes ahead and it previews the first one on the list, and I could scroll through it, you know, look at the report, do whatever I need to the report. And when I go ahead and close it, it then brings up the next report without me having to select that report or do anything else. When I go ahead and close that one, it brings up the next report, and I close that one, it brings up the general ledger. And then if I close that one, it brings up that report list because I said I wanted to include a report of all of the reports that are in this batch. So it's just a list of the reports. I'm going to go ahead and close that. And you do have the option to export the reports too. You can export them to either an Excel file, to a PDF, to a CSV file. When you go ahead and choose to export to a file, it'll ask you where you want to export it to. So I'm going to just go ahead and export this to my desktop. So I'm going to click Save on that, and it's going to go ahead and export that report. Now, when you do it as a PDF, it's going to be one report after another. When you do it as a Excel file, it actually will be, it'll actually be different tabs on the same Excel file. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and bring up an example of what that might look like. So I'm just going to double click here, and that was coming up on another screen of mine. That's why you didn't see that. But first it has the first report. And as I scroll through here, it's going to go through the income statement. And then at the end of the income statement, it goes on to the balance sheet, the bank register report, and then the general ledger report. Okay, so it just does one report after another as a PDF file. And as that Excel file, it would be different tabs within the same Excel file. Now, the last thing, of course, is if you wanted to add this to your database favorites. Now, we learned in the video on report favorites, we learned that in order to add a report to your database favorites tab, if you have that enabled, you need to right click on it. We have to do that for each, if we want to add this batch over there, we actually have to add each report individually and then recreate the folder over on that tab. So I'm just going to right click and add database favorites for each one of these. Right click and add it to the database favorites, right click, add it to the database favorites, and then right click and add it to the database favorites. So now I've added all 4 reports here to my database favorites tab, and I just need to recreate that folder over here. And these are our monthly reports for accountant. And once again, then I would drag those reports into that folder, and then put them in the order that I want to see them. Oops, I accidentally previewed it. I'm going to go ahead and drag them all into this folder. Okay, so it's basically the same thing, and then to run them, you get that batch information over here on the right. So it can be either on your favorites tab or on your database favorites tab.